Good morning, everyone. It is 9:30. We're on time. It's July 25th, 2018, and this is the board meeting of the Peace River, Manasota Regional Water Supply Authority Board of Directors meeting. If you're able, Commissioner Dougherty is going to lead us in the invocation, and then we'll do the pledge. So stand if you're able.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let us pray. Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day. We thank you for your many blessings. Father, we're so thankful for this authority and the relationship with the four counties, Manatee, Sarasota, Charlotte, and DeSoto. It is truly a blessing, Father. We ask now as we conduct the business of the authority today that you guide and direct the conversations and that we seek your will in everything that's said and done. In Christ's name we pray. Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Well, the first thing that we'll do, as we always do, we'll start in this your left-hand corner, and we'll all introduce ourselves going through the room so we all know who's here. Ann?
Ann Lee, Water Supply Authority.
Richard Anderson, Water Supply Authority.
Mike Coates, Water Supply Authority. Kevin Morris, Water Supply Authority.
Commissioner Debbie McDowell, City of Northport. Jennifer DeRoche, City of Northport. Michelle Pitts, City of Northport.
Ward Ritz with the Water Authority.
Tim Curran with AECom.
Jonathan Lewis, Sarasota County.
Mark McNeil, ASRS.
Terry Holcomb, HDR. Ashley Neely, Warren.
Al Daniels, Charlotte County. Joe White,
Chris Sherrick, Sherrick Solutions.
Lita, Progressive Water Resources.
Wayne White, Kinley One. Neil Wayne, Jacobs.
Ryan Messer, Jacobs.
Tom Trina, King Engineering.
Andrew Coleman, Weedon and Sawyer.
Mike McGee, Black and Beach.
Bill Waller, Waller Consulting.
Mark Simpson, Manatee County.
John Ferguson, Southwest Florida Water Management District.
Hector Flores with Charlotte County.
Carolyn Miller, Charlotte County.
Cole McLean, American Fire. David Dash, Sarasota County. Mark Cunningham, Sarasota County.
George McFarland, Sarasota County.
Okay, what I do deliberately because we watch you all do that, and it's the only entertainment we get. We never tell you how to do it, and we love the fits and starts, and do we go through one side? So that's done deliberately, just so you know. We've got a few folks that I'd like to acknowledge. We have Commissioner McDowell from Northport, and we have Jonathan Lewis, the Sarasota County Administrator, and Mark Cunningham, the Assistant County Administrator. And with that, Mr. Lewis is going to give an introduction today, and welcome.
Good morning. Jonathan Lewis, Sarasota County Administrator. Welcome, and it's our pleasure today to host this meeting here at Sarasota County. Today's agenda for you all includes several items that places a continued focus on advancing regional water supply efforts for its members and the region as a whole. One of those items is your fiscal year 2019 budget. Strong fiscal planning and developing creative strategies will allow us in this region to maintain adequate water supplies for years to come. We recognize your 20-year capital improvement program. This allows all regional members the ability to plan and coordinate more effectively to ensure financial stability while meeting future water supply needs. This type of planning and coordination, and that's just one example of something Peace River does to help make sure that happens. But this type of planning and coordination will continue to strengthen our region's water supply and make sure we have adequate resources for decades to come. Thank you for allowing us to host this meeting, and we hope you have a productive and maybe a little bit more entertainment as you go. Commissioner Mayo.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much, Jonathan. With that, I have, we have by the way, I'm being reminded that we need to put that into the record. This agenda that we're going through was amended on July 23rd. With that said, we have no cards. Anyone here wishing to speak for 3 minutes, public comment? Seeing none, Mr. Lehman, any additions or deletions?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, we have an amended agenda. It was amended on July 23rd. The changes were emailed to you, the board members, and also posted on our website. Those changes include the deletion of item 9 and change of motion on item number 8. Those are redlined within the summary agendas and the agendas that you now have.
Okay, with that, we're going to open the public hearing for budget for fiscal year 2019, and Mr. Lehman and some others are going to help us with that.
Yes, good morning again, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. It's my pleasure to present to you today the proposed budget for FY19, which starts October 1st of this upcoming year. Certainly the budget is in concurrence with our mission of the authority and our vision, and also our strategic plan and our goals and that are associated with that. The budget process is all-inclusive. The authority staff, the member staffs, the member administration, your respective boards, and also certainly you, the board, but also importantly, external agencies and the public. The tentative budget was adopted at your April 4th board meeting. At that time, it was posted on our website along with the backup data that built that budget. You also met again on May 30th. This board adopted the 5-year CIP and 20-year plan with that. So today we stand after 3 months of availability to the public to present to you the final proposed budget. The budget analysis, the cost is consistent with increased water demand increases on a yearly basis. The pool water was updated from the tentative budget to agree with Charlotte County's water demand projections. That had no impact on the cost of the budget, just some available pool water. Staffing is same as proposed. Compensation budgeted at 4% increase, health increases at 5%, and 1 new staff position for land management, environmental monitoring purposes. We prioritize R&R funding to maintain the infrastructure, to make sure we have the adequate infrastructure to provide a reliable water system. We also have incorporated the 5-year capital CIP program that you, the board, approved last month. It reflects, I'm glad to say that also the upcoming budget reflects grant funds for the CIP projects, mostly from SWIFMUD, but also state appropriations, which provide customer savings. Looking at the budget compared to last year, you can see the increase of approximately $10.2 million. We break that into 2 funds. The administrative office, which provides administration for the authority at our Lakewood Ranch office. Facilities, which of course is the major part of operations, construction of the facilities. The increase, you can see that in the green part. Looking historically, the O&M budget shown in the beige has stayed very, very consistent, even with increase in water demands. The non-O&M, which includes the debt service, R&R cost, those type costs, have stayed fairly steady. You can see there was a dip in 2016. That was because we refunded some of our debt service for cost savings. Going back, you can see the green represents projects. So we have an increase in projects. Primarily, a lot of those projects are the 2 pipeline projects that you'll hear later on from Kevin. Those 2 projects are anticipated to be in construction. Our expenditures, O&M cost out of the $60 million is approximately 1/3 of that. That's all inclusive of the O&M. You can see where the debt service falls from our bonded debts. Projects. That's the biggest part of the budget for the upcoming year. County payments, which is inclusive of payments to Charlotte County for the 91 acquisition, and also payment to DeSoto County for when, by contract, which is basically payment in lieu of taxes from when it was when the Peace River facility was under private ownership. The disbursements, that's refunding to our customers for debt coverage. We collect debt coverage in 1 year and refund it the next. Other costs primarily include R&R contribution and also transfer to CIP, contingencies, and the debt service coverage. Available funds, we are an enterprise fund, so water sales is the major source of income. We also have monies coming from the CIP fund and grants. As I said before, if you looked at this year's budget, it was a very minimal grant. We didn't have projects ongoing for construction. Next year we do. So we have significant grant money coming in. Other income, primarily member fees, planning assessments, and we also get federal subsidy for the BABS bonds that were issued in 2010. The reserve funds are primarily programmed reserve funds. Primarily, that's the on-our cost funds that are intended to be used by the budget for projects. And of course, money forwards is our anticipated fund balance at the end of the fiscal year to carry forward. Looking at our rate for upcoming year, just like water bills that you, the public, get at home, there's a base rate, which is based on the fixed cost, and we have the water use charge, which is based on the actual meter delivery. Looking at the base charge component, the biggest primary differential between customer billings is debt service. We break the debt service into the 3 different water supply sources. We also have debt service by each primary differential of the pipelines. So that varies depending on the customer participation. The fixed O&M costs are divided up basically as a common rate based on the water allocation within the master water supply contract. I'm proud to say that the base rate charge for the coming year is a small increase, and looking back over 5 years, the total increase is less than 3% from 5 years ago, and that's with greatly increased water demand and delivery. Even more impressive is the water use charge has remained the same over the last 6 years at 74 cents, and that's the actual metered cost to all customers for their actual meter delivery. So looking at the budget itself in total for next year, what are the rates, fees, and charges? You can see how the base rate breaks out for the $24.2 million by customer. That's an actual charge per year to each customer. And the water use rate, as I said before, remaining at 74 cents. The member fee is charged for administrative costs for the 4 county members. That's why you see nothing for Northport. That's broken up. Half of it's broken up by population, and half of it's divided up by 25% equal members. So that is the formula by board policy as to how that's set up. The planning assessment is assessed to all members, customers. Really, the $100,000 is within the budget to move forward with our water master plan that we'll be embarking on soon. Actually for the next fiscal year. That's really broken up by population. That's how that number is derived, because it's benefits for everybody into the future. So, Mr. Chairman, the total enterprise fund budget proposed for the upcoming fiscal year, $59,634,692. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll turn it back to you for the continuance of the public hearing.
Okay. Before we do that, I should have introduced Julian DeLeon, the Utility Director for DeSoto County. Commissioner Langford is in a Board of County Commissioner meeting in DeSoto County today. So welcome, and you get to vote right along with us, buddy. Thank you. With that, I have no speaker cards. Anyone here to speak on this item that we're now doing, the public hearing for the budget? Seeing none, we're going to close the, any questions for Mr. Lehman while we're still in a public hearing setting? Seeing none, we're going to close the public hearing, and the chair would entertain a motion at this point.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
move approval of the budget for fiscal year 2019 in the amount of $59,634,692.
Okay, motion by Commissioner Dougherty, seconded by Commissioner Trace. Any discussion? Commissioner Dougherty.
Mr. Chairman, during my pre-agenda meeting with Mr. Lehman and Mr. Coates, I suggested that as we get into this year, that we have all these numerous revenue streams coming in, grants, we've got water use, all that stuff. I'd like to see flow chart, basically, of how when these revenues come in, how they go to R&R, how they go to CIP, how they go to the general fund, reserve, whatever. I don't know that I've ever seen anything, just a graphic would be good for me, just to understand. And then maybe we might want to consider setting policy on that, because I don't believe there is a policy path. Is that correct?
Mr. Lehman?
Actually, after our meeting, I went back and looked, and I found some flow charts exactly what you're asking from 2012. And really, the policy, I mean, the flow of the funds is identified in our covenants of our bond issues. But absolutely, we need to bring it to you, the board, so everybody understands how it flows and why it's that way.
That's good.
All right, so we have a consensus amongst the board that Commissioner Dougherty's request that Pat Lehman moves forward on that. Good. Okay.
We'll make that an agenda item for the next board meeting.
Perfect. Any other comments? Hearing none, we have a motion on the floor. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Is anyone opposed? Chair votes aye, so that motion moves forward 4-0. All right. We're now, Mr. Lehman?
Yes, the next item is Resolution 2018-09, which setting forth the rates, fees, and charges for FY 2019, mimicking what's in the budget.
Okay, so this is just the second part to our budget review. We'll entertain a motion on that item.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
Move approval of Resolution 2018-09.
Okay, moved by Commissioner Dougherty, seconded by Commissioner Trace. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Is anyone opposed? Chair votes aye. That motion passes 4-0. We are now on the consent agenda, and just let's go over one more time, Mr. Lehman, the changes to numbers 8 and 9 in the consent agenda before we take a motion on that.
Item 9, which was a transfer of funds from the general fund to CIP fund in the amount of $500,000, was removed from the agenda. That action was then included in item number 8 with the approval of the maintenance building, with the transfer, adding to that motion, the transfer of $500,000 from the general fund to the CIP fund specific to that project.
Okay, a motion on the consent agenda?
Mr. Chairman, I move approval of the consent agenda with the changes that have been made.
Okay, the consent agenda motion made by Commissioner Dougherty, seconded by Commissioner Trace. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And that's as amended. Anyone opposed? Hearing none, the chair votes aye, and the consent agenda moves forward with a 4-0 vote. We are now on.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, sir.
Could I just make a comment on the
Absolutely.
changes? First of all, I want to say I appreciate the change made by Mr. Lehman. During my pre-agenda meeting, the concern I had was related to the term common benefit projects in original agenda item 9. Although it's in our CIP that way, we haven't really, as we talked about on April 4th during our workshop, we really want to sit down, I think, and develop policy. What are the smaller, first of all, what are smaller projects? What are common benefit projects? And get that policy adopted. So the money was going, this $500,000 was going to the maintenance facility anyway. So I requested that change, and I appreciate Mr. Lehman, Mr. Coates making that change. So we get on it now and try to get the policy established. That was the reason.
All right, we're on the regular agenda, and we're on item number 1, water supply conditions, and Mr. Anderson is going to help us with that.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, board members, Richard Anderson of your staff. There we go. Item one, as usual, is the water supply conditions update. This is the water supply conditions through the month of July, and then your demands and usage through the month of June. As you probably heard at the May meeting, we got a tremendous amount of rain in May that really jump-started the water supply conditions and the rainy season for us. As you can see, in May, we ended up getting about 11.3 inches of rain in the basin, which really, like I said, kick-started the rainy season for us. Since then, we've had additional good rain. The month of June, we ended up at almost 9 inches of rain. And then through July 10th, we only had 2 inches of rain, but as of yesterday, we're up to about right here, we're about 6.3 inches for the month of July. So well on our way to being average rainfall for the month of July as well. River flow conditions, as I said, that tremendous amount of rain in May really kick-started the river flow. We ended up averaging about 1,300 CFS in the river in May. As you can see, the average was down here about 500 for the month of May as the average. So really started getting really good flows in May. June, we averaged almost 3,100 CFS. And then through July 10th, we were up to 4,600 CFS. Through yesterday, we're down a little bit. We're at about 3,800. So we have ample water in the system flowing through the river and the gauges on the Peace River. River withdrawals, even though we did get a tremendous amount of rain in May, we have to wait that typical 2 to 3 weeks to flush the river out and let the water quality improve. So we ended up not taking any water in May, as you can see. Then beginning about June 10th, we started withdrawals and averaged about 45 MGD for the month of June. And then through July 10th, we'd averaged about 60 MGD, right about 59.5 MGD for the month of July. As of today, as you'll see in a minute, we are fairly well topped off in the reservoir system, so we're now averaging about 45 MGD withdrawals from the river system. Surface water storage is reservoir storage. As of July 10th, we were just under 6 billion gallons. As of yesterday, we're up to almost 6.5 billion, 6.43 billion in the reservoir system. So we went from a low in May of about 4.7, and right now we are topped off and we're basically in maintenance mode with the reservoir storage system. So we're in really good shape on the system. With ASR storage, as you can see, we've been in storage mode since the middle of, there we go. Been in maintenance mode since December, so we've basically been maintaining the system in ready status. We did take a little bit of water out, about 125 million in June for routine testing and sampling, making sure all the equipment and gauges work properly and so on and so forth. Since then, we have started as of July 5th recharging the system, and we're right back up to almost 7 billion gallons again in that system. So again, really good shape. We're going to continue to recharge the ASR through October, weather permitting. As long as we have the flows, we will continue to build water into that system as well. So water supply conditions, this is the summary of conditions. As of, like I said, July 10th, we had almost 6 billion gallons in the raw water, 6.85 in the ASR, total of 12.8. As we sit here today, we have about 500 million more. We're at about 13.4 billion combined in the storage system. So it's in really super good shape as we go through the wet season. Now we turn to the production. This is the regional usage for the month of June. As you can see, the authority in June, we produced about 23 million gallons a day. Your county facilities produced about 46.5 MGD. Total production was about 69.5 million gallons for the month. 3.5 of that was sent to Manatee County's consecutive systems on the coast. So the total usage by authority members and customers was just under 66 million gallons a day. For the individual members, Charlotte County, for the month of June, Charlotte used about 9.75 million gallons a day from the authority, 350,000 from their burnt store facility for a total of about 10.1 million gallons a day. Your 12-month running average, which runs from July through June of 18, you're averaging about 11 MGD, which represents about 57% of your available capacity for production capacity. DeSoto County, DeSoto for June used 0.6 MGD more or less, supplied 300,000 from your DCI facility. Total usage was about 900,000 gallons. Your 12-month average is about 0.94 MGD, and that is about 66% of your available capacity. Manatee County for June, self-supplied 32.3 MGD. They exported 4.3 to Sarasota County and exported, as I said, about 3.5 to their other consecutive customers on the coast. Total production at the Lake Manatee facility was about 40 MGD. Your 12-month running average is about 31.4, and that represents about 60% of your available capacity. And Sarasota County. Sarasota for the month of June, about 12 MGD from the authority, imported another 4.25 from others, and self-supplied about 3.1 MGD from your facilities and well fields. Total usage, 19.4. Your 12-month running average, 19.63, which represents about 58% of your available capacity. And the city of Northport, finally, we have Northport took about 0.55 from the authority, self-produced about 2.5 MGD, and exchanged another 80,000 gallons a day with the Sarasota County. Total usage was 3.17. And your 12-month running average is about 3.2, which represents about 52% of your available capacity. Now, the regional demands, this is a sum of all the previous slides I just showed you. For the month of June, 69.92. This represents, I'm sorry, this is the 12-month running average. This represents total usage, including the water sent to the consecutive customers of Manatee County. So we're averaging about 70 MGD, which is about 67% of available capacity. And water utilized for June, again, we have 105 of available capacity. 69.4 was used, leaving 35 MGD available, or about 66% utilization for the month of June. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? I just have a comment. Can you go back one slide, please?
Sure.
Because this is a question that's often asked, and I got asked the other day in front of a large group. For the people that are watching us today and for the people out there that are curious, we're only using 66% of our production capacity. And in addition, there's 13.5 billion gallons between the ASR wells and the reservoirs in storage. Is that correct?
That is correct, yes, sir.
Thank you so much. Any other comments on item number 1 of the regular agenda? Okay, with that, we're going to move on to item number 2, ongoing projects overview and status. Mr. Morris is going to help us with that, and we've got 4 items to go over there.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record, I'm Kevin Morris with the authority staff. Good morning, and good morning to your fellow board members. Item number 2 doesn't require any action from the board, but we're always interested if you have any direction for us on these projects. I'm going to talk about 4 projects today. I'm going to talk about our 2 pipeline projects, the Phase 1 interconnect project, the Phase 3B interconnect project. I'll talk about a project that we recently completed, the stormwater management system improvements, and I'll also talk about a prospective project that's coming up, the filter cell structural cover project. Jumping right in, the Phase 1 interconnect project is located at the boundary. It starts between the county boundary of DeSoto County and Charlotte County, and it extends south along US 17 to the Shell Creek water treatment plant. This graphic shows you with the bold red line, shows the alignment of the pipeline. You can see the respective county lines there in the north or the upper part of the slide, and the pipe follows US 17 down to the south of the slide or the bottom of the slide, the Shell Creek Water Plant. It's 6 miles of 24-inch diameter pipe, and the benefits are that it bolsters regional reliability, creates an emergency backup to the city of Punta Gorda as well as DeSoto County, and also brings water to a rapidly developing corridor within Charlotte County along US 17. We're going to focus with some aerial photographs now and try to give you a sense for where the pipeline will be installed, and we'll start at the north end of the project boundary. So in this photograph, you're looking to the south along US 17. That's the Walmart mechanized food distribution warehouse there in DeSoto County, and in the middle of the frame there we have DeSoto County South Booster Pump Station. And our pipeline is going to come from the pump station and extend along the eastern side of US 17 all the way down to North Washington Loop Road. From North Washington Loop Road, we'll then just hang a right and we'll run along the north side of North Washington Loop Road until we reach the juncture of Three Rivers Road and North Washington Loop Road. Now in this photograph, you're able to see the Shell Creek Reservoir in the upper part of the slide, and again, we're looking to the south. Our pipeline in this slide is going to come along the north side of Washington Loop Road, and we're going to go underneath the roadway with casing. There's a 112-foot long section of casing. It will be a jack and bore project. We will not stop the traffic on North Washington Loop Road. Traffic will be allowed to continue during this pipe installation. Then we run along the alignment, the east side of Three Rivers Road until we get close to the Shell Creek Reservoir and the Hendrickson Dam. Focusing now on that segment around the dam, this is a short video clip. The Hendrickson Dam this is just the spillway, a 500-foot wide spillway. The Hendrickson Dam itself is about 1/3 of a mile long and consists of the abutments on the north and south side of the spillway itself. In the top of the frame there is Three Rivers Road, which our pipeline is coming down. To the bottom of the frame here is the city of Punta Gorda's raw water pump station, and of course on the right is the Shell Creek Reservoir, which is their primary storage element for the water supply. Now looking at an aerial photograph of where our pipeline is going to come across this corridor, what you see is we come along the eastern side of Three Rivers Road, and then near a homeowners association boat ramp, we are going to start a directional drill. We're going from one side of the Shell Creek to the other, from upland to upland. We're not going to impact any wetlands along the route. So it's about a 3,000-foot long directional drill, and we will be about 40 feet below the bottom of the creek for most of this run. Transitioning now to looking north from hovering over the Shell Creek Water Plant, our pipeline comes across that corridor we just talked about and emerges in the upland areas, and then we transition, make our way through a meter assembly into the Shell Creek Water Treatment Plant. We have 2 additional jack and bores here. We have a 78-foot section of casing to allow the city to continuously use the roadway to the river, to the reservoir intake pump station. And then getting across South Washington Loop Road, we put in a 32-foot piece of casing. So again, our pipeline is protected under the roadway, and also we do not disrupt the traffic during the construction project. So where are we on, as far as schedule goes? King Engineering was the consultant who was selected. They've designed the project. It's been permitted. Contractors have been pre-qualified. Right now we are in the property acquisition phase. We are preparing the bidding documents. We anticipate issuing the invitation to bid sometime in the next 60 days or so. And then hopefully we will bring to you a low bidder for award in December of this year, or perhaps February of early next year. The estimated cost of this project is $12 million, and the source of funds you can see broken down there. The City of Punta Gorda, $2 million, the Water Management District, $6 million, and the State of Florida, $4 million. Switching gears and moving north to the Phase 3B project.
Hold on one second.
Yes.
Any questions for Mr. Morris on 2A? Anything?
Just a,
Yes.
I was just curious on, all your environmental permits have been secured? All
Yes,
the
they-
agencies?
Yes, they have.
Good deal. And the depth of the directional drill, you said about 40 feet below the bottom?
Right.
Soils, geotech, was that the reason to be that deep? Interesting. Some other time, sidebar, I'd be curious to take a look at those drawings.
Well, it's a trade-off. If you go deeper, we start to run into some really, really hard sandstones in this area. So you want to go deep enough so that your risk of frack out is minimized, but you don't want to go so deep that you're now into that rock layer. And then sometimes with directional drilling, you can glance off of that rock layer and it can lead to some stability controls as far as controlling the drill head. So it's a fascinating process. This is a fairly long directional drill, but we're confident we're in good shape with it.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, it just seems like a small little project, a couple of feet of pipe and nothing to worry about. Okay, Kevin, you're on 2B now.
Yes, and I'm sorry, at any point, if anyone has a question, feel free to stop me. So the Phase 3B project is in central Sarasota County. If we look at this location map, what you can see, again, the bold red line indicates the alignment of this pipeline. It begins from near the Sarasota County landfill, the Central Solid Waste Disposal Complex, and extends north along Cowpen Slough, and then we take a right turn, and we head east for about a mile before, again, turning left and heading north to Clark Road. So this project consists of 4 miles of 48-inch diameter pipe, 1 mile of 36-inch diameter pipe, and again, the benefits of the regional transmission system, very similar to Phase 1. It bolsters regional reliability, extends the regional system, and brings water to a rapidly developing area off of Clark Road. We're going to take the same tact and use some aerial photographs to try to draw a picture for you of what this project is going to look like. We're going to start on the south end here. This is hovering over Cowpen Slough in the middle of your frame and looking north. And you can't see the landfill in this photograph. It will become visible in the next sequence of pictures. But a very big water control structure you see off to the upper right-hand side of this slide is the final impoundment that releases water from the Donna Bay project that Sarasota County has been building. That water is stored to provide the accumulation benefit, treatment benefits of the water flowing through wetlands, and then is released back into Cowpen Slough. And what it has done is attenuated those peak wet season flows and improved water quality. So it's a great project. But there are some constraints that creates for us. Our pipeline is going to run from the meter assembly that you see in the lower center part of your frame up the east side of Cowpen Slough, and there is a point right here inside this yellow box where our pipeline is going to cross over a major utility discharge from that Donna Bay system. This little video clip shows that 6-foot diameter reinforced concrete pipe outfall. And so we have to get past there. We either have to go over it or we have to go under it. Our design team looked at the options of going over or under. The choice that we made was to go over with an aerial crossing, and this schematic is a little difficult to make out. If you will, the pipe is buried below ground up to the point where you see the dotted line, and then it will emerge. There will be a pipe support in approximately the middle of the span, but this is about a 50-foot long aerial crossing. And the reason that we chose an aerial crossing was to give the county the flexibility in the future if they ever wanted to put an open channel in, if they wanted to put a second pipe in, if they need to do rehab on the current pipe. And so that's why we chose an aerial crossing for this particular potential conflict area. In the other areas along this pipeline, you'll see we go under the channel rather than over. So going to the, moving northward to the point at which we make the jog to the east, here's a photograph looking again along Cowpen Slough, and you can see the landfill there in the background, and you're looking south to the upper right and east to the upper left. And our pipeline is again going to come along the eastern side of Cowpen Slough, and then we will take a right turn and stay along the south side of this canal or flowway within the Donna Bay property. And I'm going to focus now on that area that you see in the yellow box. This is a major water control structure. This is the CS3 water control structure that regulates the flow through the Donna Bay system. A very important structure. It's a critical structure, and our pipeline has to get past this point. And keep in mind, this is a 48-inch diameter pipeline. It's not a small pipeline by any stretch. And so the design team looked at how we could best get past this point, and we chose to divert to the south side of the control structure, and we will put in sheet pile walls on either side of this trench, and we will trench our pipe in the dry season when the county can afford to stop the flow in this channel. And so to protect the pipe, we're going to have the pipe within a 55-foot long piece of casing, and we're going to top it with a 12-inch thick concrete slab. And the reason for that is a large channel like this is going to have maintenance, routine maintenance that needs to be done on it, and that maintenance is going to come in the form of big excavators, and you don't want those excavators to have to remember that there was a pipe buried under there. So it's belts and suspenders, but when you're talking about a 48-inch diameter pipe, you want to really be sure that you have a bulletproof design. Now, looking a little further north from this same vantage point, the next point of interest I'm going to draw your attention to is located here in this box. This is the haul road. This is where the fill material, the daily cover fill material that the county imports to the landfill comes from. It comes from the left side of the screen, goes to the right side of the screen. These are heavy off-road dump trucks, and so in that location we've put in a 53-foot piece of casing to protect our pipe again from the loads of those trucks. And I tried to slow these. That's as slow as you can make an animated truck move in PowerPoint. But Scott Schroyer with the utility department questioned whether they may actually drive that fast at times. So
Through the trees.
through the trees. I'm going to now go to the home run, if you will, on this pipeline. And there's a couple of points of interest I want to bring your attention to here. And in this artist's conception, you can see our pipeline on the eastern or western side of this access roadway that runs right along here. This pipeline is located in an old abandoned orange grove property. And we do cross this roadway at this point. That's where the county's property ends and the Albritton property begins. And then in the distance, you can see we've sketched in Clark Road. So you get a sense of perspective and where the pipeline is going. Now, one of the really important features associated with this part of the county is potential future development. And so we've installed 166 feet of casing at this location to accommodate the potential future construction of the Bee Ridge Road extension. It's very difficult when you're looking out 10 or 15 years to know exactly where a pipeline is going to go. The county the transportation department needs 100 feet of casing. We added about 30 feet to either side just to make sure that from a conceptual standpoint, we've given them a good target for this curving roadway to hopefully hit right where we've planned for it to go. And then finally, looking towards to the far north end of the slide here, we have the potential for this roadway at some future date may become a Knights Trail extension. Again, there are no current concrete plans for this to happen, but we're building a pipeline that we want to last 75 to 100 years. And so we have to consider any possible future potentialities. We feel like installing 143 feet of casing is a good insurance policy to prevent us from having to interrupt this pipeline to armor it or lower it or put it in a casing at some later date. So where we stand on Phase 3B, we is similar to Phase 1. The board selected King Engineering. The project is completely designed. Contractors have been pre-qualified. Permitting is underway. We have our draft ERP, the Army Corps permit. We received our first RAI, and we've responded to them this week. Monday, we responded to them with the first RAI. So the permitting is underway. We received the Department of Health water main extension permit. We've received permission to, we have a small amount of mitigation. We've received permission from the Department of Environmental Protection to use the Mayaca Mitigation Bank for this mitigation that's needed. We're in the process of getting a permit for a grand tree. There's a very large oak tree that is unfortunately right in the middle of where our pipeline is going to go, and we just can't cost effectively get around it. There's just no other option, so we're in process with that. The property acquisition, in this particular case, the property acquisition is really mostly transactions between the authority and the county. We're working with the real estate department. I'm meeting with Cameron Crenshaw this Friday to talk to him about our temporary construction easements. And so hopefully we'll have those on the county's docket sometime this fall. Our plan is to bid this potentially this fall or winter, which would give us an award in February of next year or April of next year. But one of the aspects we want to be mindful of is that we don't want to build a pipeline that doesn't have anywhere to go. And so we need to coordinate the construction of this pipeline with the county's 5-mile-long pipeline that will tie in with it. And that'll prevent either them from having a dead-end pipeline or us from having a dead-end pipeline. So we want those pipelines to end at about the same time frame. And so we're anticipating we could bid it this fall, but based upon how the county's project is projected to go, we might want to hold off on that. Again, you can see the estimated cost and the source of funds. It's split equally between the county and SwiftMud, and the state of Florida has offered, has ponied up $500,000 as well. And that's all I have on Phase 3B, and I'll transition on unless there's a question on it.
Any questions for Kevin on 2B? Commissioner Doherty?
Yeah, I'm just curious, on that crossing of the 72-inch outfall pipe, Kevin, on the south end down there, you said we're going to go aerial?
Yes.
What kind of clearance are we going to have from finished grade to the bottom of the 48? I'm just curious from the standpoint if they're going to come in the future possibly and open channel that or put something else in there. Have we left enough clearance?
You know, I don't know the.
Just curious.
Yeah, I would imagine it is 3 feet or so, just a nominal distance between the slab. There will be a slab there, and the bottom of the pipe. Just from a practicality standpoint, you have to be able to get tools on the on the flanges. But I don't know. Tom Trena is here he's our project manager with King. Do you know what the clearance is vertically from ground level to the bottom of the pipe?
It's approximately 4 feet.
About 4 feet.
Very good, thank you.
Okay, we're on to item 2C.
Mr. Commissioner, I have two more. If you'll indulge me, I have 2 more projects to talk about.
No, this is,
Right?
I want to compliment you on behalf of the entire board. Your aerials, your drone flights, your animation, it keeps getting better and better. So we're following.
Okay, all right. I'll try not to disappoint here in the next 5 minutes. And I want to talk about a project that we just recently completed, the Stormwater Management System project. This was designed by Johnson Engineering. Their estimate for the project was $780,000 approximately, and our low bidder was Haskins. We awarded this in December, I believe it was. They came in about $80,000 below the engineer's estimate. This was a plan sheet that shows where our existing stormwater pond was, where the new stormwater pond was going to go. This pond is much larger. This pond is large enough to accommodate the build-out of this water treatment plant. We will never have to add to the stormwater treatment capacity again. So this is prospectively and looking down the road. So in this photograph you see in the upper left, this was our existing pond. This is sludge bed number 5, which is very useful for us whenever we want to drain some of the contact units or the thickeners. The sludge beds provide a convenient location to drop that liquid to. The middle slide here shows they've cleared a margin of the woods. This was in about February, March timeframe. Filling the old pond in, building the new pond, and then this photograph taken about 3 weeks ago shows the new pond. The old pond has been filled in, and that pad, that slab, is where our new maintenance facility is going to go. So the alternative of putting the maintenance facility in another part of the plant, this is the best location for that facility. We did a site master plan effort, and this puts the maintenance facility close to where they're trying to maintain the equipment rather than way off to the south. Some of the benefits of, or the notable bullets you see on there, we received about 11 inches of rain in May. That's about 3 times the average for the month of May, but Haskins did a great job for us. We're very happy with them. We finished about $40,000 under budget, and we also created a stockpile of fill material that we'll be able to use in the future that has a value of somewhere between about $180,000. The final project I'm going to talk to you about this morning is a project that we haven't, we've started the design, we've completed the design, but it is, has not been let for construction, and I'll talk to you about that in some detail. The filter cover project. In this photograph, you see our filters within these red boxes. We have 26 filters right now. They comply with all the state and federal rules, but they're not covered from airborne debris that could blow into them. And so as a real consequence of that, we're not allowed to factor in the disinfection credit that we receive for our free chlorine contact that happens before those filters. So as a consequence, we keep our storage tanks full at the plant most of the time. They're within just a few feet of full all the time, and that gives us that buffer, that cushion that we need to comply with all the regulations. So some of the benefits of covering those filters would be improved public health protection. We would be able to increase that disinfection credit far beyond the minimum that is needed. It would give our operators safety and coverage when there are storms or lightning and they're out there at the filters. And then also it would give us better treatment consistency. That I talked about the increased disinfection redundancy, and rather than the plant having to accelerate and slow down to match the flows that are going on in town, we'd be able to set the plant at one flow rate and let it run, and that's the best way to get consistent water treatment. So the design commenced about a year ago. TKW Consulting Engineers was our design team. The design's complete and permitting is underway. The DEP construction permit is good for 5 years. Some of the elements of the structural design, it's a structural skeleton and roof designed for Category 5 hurricane winds. The design has standardized removable side screen panels. When the hurricane comes and blows those panels out, that's okay. We just don't want the roof and the structure to blow down, okay? The screen panels, you can't design a screen panel to stand up against a Category 5 hurricane. It just can't happen. Some of the design challenges the team ran into were very narrow corridors. Our corridors on top of the filter cells were designed to allow people to move around with hoses and do work. If you then install a structural element or beam right in the middle of that walkway, suddenly now it's very difficult for people to move around. There also, every one of our filter facilities has a cantilevered concrete walkway that really makes it difficult to fabricate the structural elements to attach to the walls. And there are many pipes and electrical conduits that you have to work around. And then also material choices. As the design team looked at options for materials, what we settled on was the use of aluminum for the structure. We did not want to use any kind of material that would require repainting or could potentially flake into the filters. So galvanized steel, even stainless steels, are attacked by the chlorine fumes. So we stuck with aluminum for the structure, and then Kynar coatings for the roof panels, fiberglass screening, and stainless steel fasteners. The projected cost in our CIP for this project was $2.4 million. When the final design estimate came together and the engineers put their estimate together, it was over $1 million more than that. And that, as we related to your customer staffs 2 weeks ago, was a surprise to us. Some of the reasons for the increase in cost, we've seen a surge in construction costs over the last year or so. The material choices, aluminum unfortunately is affected by the tariffs that have been proposed. Engineering News Record is anticipating that aluminum prices will go up by 11.4% year on year by the end of this year as a result of that. The hurricane resistance in design added a lot of stiffness to the structure, which increased the camber of some of our beams. And then also the challenges of mounting what essentially, this project has to be mounted to the side of structures that are essentially 20, 25 feet in the air, and that the difficulty of that lends itself to the construction costs. We had a VE study that was completed by a third party, HDR, and it largely confirmed these cost estimates. I have to congratulate Richard's staff, the plant staff, have cut probably about $100,000 by eliminating some luminaries and making better use of some of our existing electrical conduits to avoid new work. We still feel, the staff still feels this is a very beneficial project. We still feel that in spite of the costs, that the merits favor it going ahead, but we understand that $1 million surprise is $1 million surprise. This is a very unique project. It's difficult to go out on the street and get historicals for a project that has such unique construction aspects. Our intent, unless you tell us differently, knowing that we need to know what the real world numbers are, our intent is to go forward and solicit bids to find out what the real world cost is. And when we solicit bids, we will solicit them with a 120 or 160, 180 day valid period to give us the time to bring it back before the board and to talk about ways to finance this. Should it come from reserves? Should it come through some sort of structured debt, and what have you? So that's unfortunately. So I've talked about 2 pipeline projects that are coming up. We're very hopeful about, and we've got a good handle on a stormwater project that was very, very successful, and the filter cell cover project, which unfortunately had a bit of a hiccup and a surprise, and the direction that is our intent to go forward with it. Unless the board has any questions, that's the end of my item this morning.
Well, thank you, Kevin, for all of that, but I think the board probably should, at this point, that last slide, let's have a discussion about whether we should move forward and get the bids on this. Anyone want to start?
I think it's the right way to go professionally. Let's see what it is. It's unique. A question for Mr. Lehman, though, is this an example of what we would be considering in the smaller common benefit CIP type projects?
Yes, because it'd be beneficial to
So this would
all
be a good
participants.
example for us, and we get into discussion on other things, how to start framing that policy. This would be a good example of what you're talking about.
Yes.
Okay.
Do we agree that maybe we should request a 180-day valid period for these bids? So, Kevin, if you would note that, just to give everybody enough time. Seems like a long time, but it's only 6 months. Anything else? Okay, thank you. We're on item number 3 on the regular agenda, partially treated water ASR pilot test results and next steps. And Mike Coates is going to help us with that. And Mike, I just hope your animations and everything else can match Mr. Morris's.
You're going to be really disappointed, I'm afraid, but that's the curse of going after Kevin in one of these presentations. Mr. Chair, board members, Mike Coates of your staff. I'm going to talk to you about the partially treated water ASR project that we have been working on really for about the last 3 years. And we've got a milestone that we've got to bring in front of you and talk a little bit about. And so that's really what this presentation is about. A little bit of background on the operation of Peace River facilities. Of course, in a gross sense, we're either in the wet season or the dry season. We're either in filling storage or recovering water from storage. And so the facilities are shown here. And we pump water from the river during high flow times. We scalp a small percentage of that flow, put it in the reservoir system, 6.5 billion gallons of storage there. That water feeds the water treatment plant, which supplies water to our customers. And during the wet season, if there's enough water in the reservoirs, if the flow is adequate in the rivers, and if the demand isn't too high, we recharge the ASR system with fully treated drinking water. So that's the wet season operation. The dry season operation, usually there's no water to be had from the river. And so we run on storage, which is why we have to have so much storage in this system. So we take water from the reservoir system when the water levels in that system get low enough. Then we employ the ASR system, and that water from aquifer storage and recovery is pumped back into the reservoirs, goes back through the treatment process, and meets the demand. Some of those components are important in the consideration of where we need to go next on this. The fact that we need to have excess capacity, treatment capacity, to recharge the ASR system is important. The fact that we put ASR water back in the reservoir to be retreated is important. All of those things add costs to the current configuration that we have. Now, we've been working on this project for about the last 3 years. We began a desktop study back in the fall of 2015. That study was presented to the board. What it showed is that we could save quite a bit of money by going to partially treated or raw water ASR on the operational side. The study at the time indicated about a $340,000 per year net savings to us, even after we paid debt service on a pump station and what it would take to put in this raw water ASR system. So a $340,000 net savings to the authority every year from not having to treat that water twice. So we embarked on a testing program out here to test this process. We started in fall of 2016. With the setup for that and the permitting, we began the pilot testing on 2 ASR wells in February of 2017, completed that about a year later, and now we are, you have in your board packet the final draft report for that pilot testing, and we did learn an awful lot from it. A little more perspective here on our property and permits. This is the RV Griffin Reserve here, about 6,000 acres of water management district property that is owned by SwiftMud and managed by the authority. We have an easement over this. We have another approximately 500 acres that's owned by the Water Supply Authority. For our ASR system, we've got 2 wells, well fields, Wellfield 2 and Wellfield 1. We have an operating permit from the Department of Environmental Protection. And that's another component that we're going to have to modify if we go to something different, if we go to raw water ASR. And we have what's called a water quality criteria exemption for arsenic that's on this property, which allows us to exceed the drinking water standard for arsenic, which is 10 micrograms per liter, as long as we keep that water on our property. And you can see that, you know, we're fairly close to the property lines in some of this. So let's talk about some of the pros and cons of going to partially treated water ASR. As we got further into this, it wasn't just the operational cost savings that became attractive on this kind of a project. As I said, this doesn't depend on the availability of excess treatment capacity at the plant to recharge the ASR system. And that's important because as we grow, we will grow into that treatment capacity, and as we grow into that, the excess becomes smaller and smaller, and the ASR system becomes less and less viable unless we add treatment capacity just to recharge that ASR system. And that's a very expensive proposition. We're looking at improved recovery efficiency from a partially treated water ASR system. We use alum in the treatment process out here, and we add total dissolved solids to our treated water. And so the water that goes into the ASR system for storage has about 75 milligrams per liter higher TDS than the water from the reservoir system. So the lower the TDS water that we're putting into that system, the better recovery we can get from it. This would also support brackish groundwater development at the site. We are down here with our site. This is the southern water use caution area, but we're in the southern water use caution area. And in order to pump what our design for a brackish groundwater facility would be, about 6 million gallons a day, in order to pump about 6 million gallons a day of brackish groundwater to get 5 million gallons a day of fresh water, we will have an impact on what's called the most impacted area. That's not allowed. And we're going to have to do something to mitigate that. And the mitigation could be we could buy out some agricultural operations out here. We would have to mitigate it some way or another. One of the ways to mitigate that is to overcharge this ASR system. And the inexpensive water, not having to treat it twice, potentially allows us to do that. So that's a potential built-in mitigation strategy out here. And then also to improve the groundwater conditions in the SWCA. We could potentially way overcharge the system if we have very inexpensive water. So there are a lot of pros to this potential to go to partially treated water ASR. But there are also some potential negatives. It requires a capital expenditure. We'd have to put in a new pump station to do this. And that new pump station, we're looking at about $7.7 million was the original estimate for that. We have to keep our wells from fouling. We're putting water that certainly is not as clean as our drinking water into these wells. We have to depend on those wells, and so we need to make sure that the wells don't foul. We need to make sure we understand what the effects are in the aquifer on water quality. And we need to consider the permittability and potential future regulatory changes that might affect this system. And so some of those items drive us to need a pilot test for this. And in fact, that's what the board approved, and that's what we have done. And we're going to go over some of the results of that today. The pilot test was done on well field 2. These two production wells, these S20 and S4, they are up by reservoir number 1. They're located in a great area for pilot testing because they're the furthest wells from our property boundary, which is down here. They're close to reservoir number 1, which means getting water into them is relatively easy. And there's a cluster of monitoring wells right in this very area that allows us to monitor the conditions that are going on during that test. So we had 2 cycles in this test. The first cycle was relatively short, February to April 2017. We injected about 60 million gallons of water into these 2 wells. And then essentially we went into a recovery phase where we recovered water from the entire well field because the spring of 2017 was relatively dry. So we suspended the testing for that period of time. And then we started back up again in July of 2017, and we ran that test until January 2018, and we injected 180 million gallons. So quite a bit of water that we put in this system. We monitored extensively water quality and well performance. This shows us part of the pump test setup out here. We had an intake out in the reservoir, and then the pump going through filtration units that recharge water to these wells. So where did we see the influence from this? On both of these cycles, these are the production wells, and the general area that we saw influence from this test was in this area right here. So inside the red box. And what did we see? We saw arsenic gradually increase in storage zone wells. Those are the wells that are in the Swanee Aquifer, which is where we're storing water. That wasn't a big surprise. We kind of expected that. Whenever you destabilize these systems, you see arsenic release again. And the arsenic is naturally occurring in the formation. So we're not putting arsenic in the formation, but we're mobilizing it in that formation. So we did see arsenic increase. And interestingly enough, we saw it increase preferentially in these 3 wells. It appears we've got a preferential flow path that goes in this particular direction. And of course, we saw coliform bacteria increase. Now, coliform bacteria is ubiquitous. It's in the reservoir system. It's in any surface water. It's in some groundwaters. And the source of some of that coliform bacteria might be sitting here on the end of our intake. I've seen a dozen birds out there before, and they've kind of stained that thing up. But that may be part of the source, but the rest of it is it's just ubiquitous in the reservoir system and in any surface water in Florida. We saw high coliform levels in these 3 wells here. And what we found also was that the inactivation period, the period between when you see the coliform and you stop pumping and when the coliform goes away, is about 3 to 4 weeks after pumping ceased. And that's a very useful piece of information for us. Well performance. The filters that we use, there are bag filters that go into these stainless steel bullets, and you can see the bullets have all these 1/8-inch holes in them. This is some of the material that actually gets through the bag filters. It's like an algal sludge, fine sediment. And we did see that affect some of the production wells, the 2 production wells we used. We lost some capacity. It wasn't a lot of loss, but it does tell us that we do need some kind of filtration system with this, and it's going to have to be better than that. We did see also that we can restore the capacity in those wells simply by pumping and surging them briefly, and this stuff comes back out. So there are some operational considerations that have been foretold by the pumping, or by the pilot test here. So what did we learn from all this? We learned that partially treated water ASR is technically feasible here. We can do it. We have a lot of the infrastructure in place to facilitate that operation. We've got surface water facilities here that we can pump from, many wells that we can use to recharge. So it's feasible. It's going to require a modification of our existing operational permit with the DEP and the issuance of what's called a zone of discharge or a water quality criteria exemption. And that's an order that allows us not to have to meet drinking water quality standards on our property. The zone of discharge is a little bit more desirable because it's not parameter specific. It doesn't just say arsenic. It can be for any number of parameters. But we see that the implementation of this is going to require some more detail. We've got a pump station that's been identified out here. We'll certainly need that. That pump station will need a filtration system that goes along with it. We may need to disinfect the water before it goes in. That's going to be something that we'll have to deal with in the permitting. We may, in fact, also need to control some additional property out here. Our well field is located relatively close to this property line. We may have to look at purchasing some additional property as a buffer for that operation. But in fact, that may need to be done anyway, whether we go to partially treated or we use fully treated water ASR. As we put more and more water in this system, our effects expand further out. And so that may be something we would have to do anyway. We will need more monitoring wells, no question about that. If we don't get any additional property, we'll probably need to reconfigure the production wells out here and eliminate some of the wells that are along or near this property boundary. These production wells cost about $1.5 million a piece. So we can buy property probably less expensively than we can eliminate wells. And we should consider the incremental implementation out here of this process. Wellfield 2 probably first because we could potentially buy some property. We have room to reconfigure some of these wells. We have less of an opportunity in Wellfield 1. And of course, we need a better handle on probable costs. We're not just talking about a pump station in this anymore at $7.5 million. It's some additional monitor wells, it's potentially some additional property. So we really do need to get a better handle on probable costs. So the next steps in this, we're going to finalize the draft report. Number 2 is obtain a permit for authorizing partially treated water ASR. That's part of our recommendation in this, is that's the next step. We need to get the permit and see what the permit says. We need to go through that process in order to get us to the point where we can contract for design services and get a better handle on what we really need to build out here. So with all of that, our recommendation is to move forward with the permitting for the use of fully treated drinking water or partially treated drinking water, or partially treated surface water at the authority's ASR well fields of the Peace River facility. We want the ability to use both. If partially treated looks like it's not going to work out after a while, we go back to fully treated. But we want that flexibility.
Mike, can I interrupt you
Yes.
at this point? Let's
I'm
go
done.
back. Let's go back one slide.
Okay?
Before we entertain a motion here, wouldn't it make sense on next steps to add a number 5 about investigating the purchase of additional land on that boundary?
Sure.
Before we get a motion, we have just a little bit of discussion on that. I mean, we're all very proud of all the things that Peace River Authority has done for decades. And we're very, I'm very quick to point out to people that we're only using, I always say, about 70% of our production ability, and that we did extensive consulting work to make sure the third future reservoir fits on this ownership, and that we're not going to put a reservoir on Orange Hammock or take any of that water. Does it make sense at this point, I'm directing this to my fellow commissioners here, that we get staff to add a number 5, which is the purchase of some additional lands, and quantify it, cost it, and just because that to me is a critical part of this. What do we think?
Mr. Chairman, I agree. I think you said about $1.5 million.
$1.5 million per production well.
Well, yeah, I think
per
it
new
makes a
one.
lot of sense to see what the feasibility is of picking up that additional land. I would agree that that should be added to the, as item 5 on the
Okay.
next steps.
And what a great protection for years into the future. So before something gets built next to us or used, or owners that are not interested in helping. So, yes, ma'am.
I'm not opposed to getting more property, but I'm very opposed to even looking at, I don't think we've done enough testing. The aquifer down there is, You've already said you're putting, you're putting bacteria down there, you're putting sludge from the river down into the aquifer. And without treating that, I don't think we've done enough testing. I have no problem with continued testing, but I don't think 6 months test in a year I think you need to go through 3-4 years rainfall and exactly what you're affecting down there. Also, some of that bacteria will form on some of those rocks down there and hold on, and you don't know that you have it. And once those rocks become, full, then there's going to be more. I just think we need to do a whole lot more testing before we agree to that. I think we could start work forward, but I think we're way too soon to start putting untreated water down into the aquifer. It's my opinion.
Well, we'll let Mike answer that, but I wonder if we can't accomplish some of the additional testing that you're after,
I have
Commissioner.
no problem with continued testing, but it says or you're requesting it for it or at the authority's discretion. I'm just not sure that the authority should have the discretion yet until we do more testing
All right, and
on the permitting.
how about where I was going, if you go back one slide, Mike? Can we accomplish some of that in a motion that adds to item number 2? To go and to begin the process of obtaining a permit, we're going to have to do a lot more studies. Is that accurate, Mike?
I think that we have enough information to permit this. I don't think we have quite enough information to build it. And so the first step in the process is to know that we can actually get a permit for it. If we can't get a permit for it, there's no sense in doing anything else other than what we're doing now. So my recommendation would be to go ahead and investigate that property, the purchase of that property, to move forward with the permitting. And then once the permitting is done, do some additional preliminary design and testing on this to make sure that we know we're getting into the right thing.
If you get the permitting, you will probably do it. They're saying it's okay. I'm just saying, I'm not sure, for what I've read all over the state, this is almost a brand-new thing. There's not some place where you can say, well, they've been doing it for 5 years. It's a new type of what we're thinking with putting untreated water into the ground. Everything else has been pretty much treated water.
Yeah, some of it has. There's a place over on the East Coast where they've been doing this for a number of years, taking water from a lake. But, we're kind of on the cutting edge of this. And City of Northport, in fact, has a project that's going on now where they're taking water from Myakkahatchee Creek and recharging an ASR well.
Manatee
So
County has the Flatwood Swamp,
yeah,
Flatford
yeah.
Swamp,
Water
same
Management
kind of
District.
thing.
Yeah, Water Management District is testing out there.
But I'm still not, I'm just saying, I think we need a whole lot more testing. It takes millions of years to get the water where it is today. And it's quite a process, and for the water to get down there as pure as it is, it's basically gone through the earth, sand filter type process. And I just think we need to make sure that we test it and get it right. That's all I'm saying.
I wonder if we can't, as one of you begins to think about boldly moving forward and making the motion here, we've added a number 5. Do we change some of the language or add a number 6?
I have no problem with continuing the testing. I have a problem with the verbiage with the or. I think right now, I don't think we're ready to, it gives the authority on the recommended motion for the use of fully treated drinking water or partially treated drinking surface water. I don't think we're at the point where we can say that, yes, we're comfortable with, on a full-time basis, putting untreated water.
Just to be clear, it says move forward with permitting. It doesn't say move forward with actually injecting at this time. The point
Right.
is, if we're going to do future testing, we have to see whether the permitting
Pretty-
would be feasible. And the idea would be you could change the motion to make it before any use of this water can be made.
I have no
Come
problem
back to-
with working for it, serving, but I want to make sure that before we actually pull the plug, that we have had the discussion and we've looked at this very, very strongly on the science.
Okay, well said, Commissioner Trace. Would somebody like to start the process with a motion, and then we can discuss it further? Commissioner Dougherty?
Yeah, I'll be happy to do that, Mr. Chairman. The key, though, is, and I respect what you're saying, Commissioner, I think the process itself going through this permitting doesn't give us construction approvals. Not even close. It just gets us, it's the first domino that's got to fall so that we can at least see that it's possible.
I'm fine with the recommended motion. I'm having a discussion, though, to say that if we don't get more science and we haven't done more, I'm uncomfortable with putting the water down there. You know, instead of just saying, oh, this is a great thing, it may be a great thing.
And I believe we'll be, Mr. Lehman, you can confirm this, I believe we'll be seeing this at numerous steps along the way to make votes, to determine whether we're
Yes.
going to do it. This is not the last time, by any means, we're going to see this item.
That is fine. I'm just saying that I have, you know, I'm watching the Flatford Swamp one, and I think we should be watching everything, and I'm sure y'all are. And I just want to make sure that we're up on that the whole time. But I have no problem. I will move that we have to take the recommended motion. But I thought we needed a discussion on it.
Okay, do you want to make the motion?
I said I moved the recommended motion.
And I'll second that.
All right, fine.
Just want to clarify that too, Mr. Chairman. If you go back to the slide, I guess, with those next steps. And again, I'm assuming in that motion.
The
that
number
we're-
5, the
we're at it.
add-on, looking at the
Perfect.
property costs, yes.
Very good.
We have Commissioner Trace making the motion with the addition of item number 5, and Commissioner Dougherty seconded it. Any further discussion? Okay, hearing none, we'll vote on that motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Is anyone opposed? Chair votes aye, and that motion, with the addition of an item number 5 to begin the process of looking at neighboring land, moves forward with a 4-0 yes. Mr. Coates,
Yes.
you got item number 4, board meeting video procedure.
I do. And I don't have a presentation on that, unfortunately. As you all know, that when we're in Sarasota County, Manatee County, Charlotte County, we do video the meetings because the facilities are on site to do that. When we have our meetings in DeSoto County, when we have them at the Peace River facility or other sites, we don't typically video the meetings. We have in the past done that on occasion. We've not been particularly successful with a contractor that we've done that with. But we have recently got a quote from a new contractor to videotape the meetings. And at the board's pleasure, we can develop a policy that says whatever you would like on videotaping our board meetings, whether we do all of them, we do most of them, it's really up to you. But the option is out there. We got about a $1,400 per meeting quote to do those meetings. So it's really up to you.
Okay, and this is with the firm that's in Northport.
Yes.
Okay, what do we all think about this?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
I appreciate, again, you bringing this forward, Mr. Coates. Mr. Lehman, I think that in today's day and age, the way, you know, I use our videos, our archives of meetings. I can't remember what I talked about 4 or 5 years ago. Every once in a while, I'll go back and look at it. It is very, very helpful. So although we do have the required recordings of our meetings, the audios at these locations, I think it would be the right thing to do to be consistent and video all of our meetings.
And I'll just add with all the things that we're in the middle of, $1,500 a meeting, $1,495, I think it was, Mike. That's nominal expense to do this. So do we have a consensus, or Mike, would you like a motion? A consensus that we move forward? Yep, you have that, Mike.
Okay.
Unanimous.
All right.
All right, we're on another easy topic. We're on regular agenda, item number 5, Lakewood Ranch Office Acquisition Study, and Ann Lee is going to help us with that.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, Ann Lee of your staff, I will be presenting today on the potential acquisition of the Lakewood Ranch office. Before I go through the results of the market study and cost-benefit analysis, I'd like to give you an overview on the property as well as our current lease. The Lakewood Ranch Administration Office is centrally located on Town Center Parkway in Lakewood Ranch, roughly 1 block north of University Parkway, which is right here. It's a great location. Like I said, we're centrally located to all of the counties, all of the cooperative agencies, consultants, and the office is easily accessible to I-75, and it's very easy to get down to our plant, which is this triangle right down here. According to the offering package that we received from Ian Black, who is the listing agent as well as the current property managers, the parcel for sale is a little over 1.5 acres. The building size is a little less than 12,000 square feet. There's ample parking. It's fully occupied. It's got mature landscaping. And they also stated a capitalization rate of 7.4%. The capitalization rate represents the annual return of income that an investment buyer would expect to see. Our current lease is a 3-year term that was negotiated last year with a 2% annual escalation, and it expires on April 30th, 2020. We have an option to renew at the same 3 years for an additional, with the same escalation rate. Our current lease payment is $13.60 a square foot, and we are also responsible for CAM charges of $6.40 a square foot, which brings our total lease payment to $20 a square foot. These CAM costs include property taxes, Lakewood Ranch Association fees, property management, as well as all of the common area upkeep and maintenance. As I stated earlier, the property was put up to sale in October 2017 for a little over $2.2 million. At the time, we were not notified of the building being up for sale until earlier this year. And when we did find out, we contacted Susan Goldstein, who performed our market sales and lease sales study last year in conjunction with the lease renewal. And we asked her to update the study to see if it would be feasible to bring it to you guys as a potential acquisition. She performed a market study based on the current properties on the market and recently sold properties similar to Lakewood Ranch office, as well as within a 5-mile radius. And her report indicated that the property is worth between $1.5 and $2 million. Part of this analysis, we went through why we should further the investigation of acquiring the building, and it came down to 3 main topics. First off, cost savings, primarily from a lower CAM expense. The authority wouldn't be subject to such items such as property taxes. We wouldn't need to have a property manager. We can piggyback some of the normal maintenance contracts such as the HVAC onto our plant contracts and save a lot of money. I'm estimating we can save about 62% annually on our CAM charges, which would take our CAM charges from $48,000 a year to about $18,000 a year. Next, since we do have another tenant in the building, we would have an additional short-term revenue stream. The other tenant currently pays about $63,000 annually in rent. Their lease term expires in December of 2019. I do not know the renewal clauses, but I would assume that it is similar to ours. So we would probably be able to easily keep a tenant if the board chooses for us to move forward on this. The last part is our long-term staffing and administration needs. As we grow, we are going to need to bring on more administrative staff, more engineers, and right now our Lakewood Ranch office is fully occupied. We occupy every office, every bit of space. This would give us the ability that if we chose to move forward and the other tenant, we did not renew the other tenants, we could build into that other section, either for offices, or we could potentially make our own commission and workshop rooms that the authority and other agencies would be able to use. As part of the analysis that was performed on this potential acquisition, a purchase versus lease break-even point was calculated based on the information provided in the sales market study and in the initial offering package. This graph represents the results of this exercise. And if we purchase the property between $1.5 and $2 million, as indicated by Ms. Goldstein's study, we would have a payback period of between 9 and 12 years. And that is with the 2% annual escalation in the lease and in the CAM, but does not take into effect any rental payments we would receive. So I wanted to look at what the payback period would be if we were the only occupants of the building, to be very conservative on this. And as the graph indicates, if you look at our lease payments and CAM charges cumulative, that's this red line, in the next 20 years, we're looking at over $3.6 million in lease and CAM charges for our office. With the board's consent to move forward on this investigation, we would like to obtain a full property appraisal, so we would know the real world costs of the property at this time. And we would like to have the permission to negotiate with the owners and representatives on a purchase price and condition and bring those items back to you at our October meeting. And with that, I will take any questions.
Okay, well, let me start, but I want the commission to go first. But Ann,
Yes, sir.
you always do a wonderful job, and you and I have been talking about this for a good 6 months. My only problem is you didn't have any animation and no drone flights, which you're going to get demerits for that.
I'm sorry.
Let's talk about this a little bit, and Ann's here to answer a lot of questions, and she's been working on this for quite a while. So I don't want to go first unless no one else has any thoughts, but I'd always like to talk last as the chair. Mr. Dougherty.
Thank you, sir. I guess we have no contract, they have no contract right now. We just have the right of first refusal. Is that?
Correct. They had one potential buyer come in earlier this year, which is when we found the building was up for sale. And they did not execute the contract. So at this point, they are not taking any offers. They are letting us make the first offer.
I guess I'm in favor of owning something versus leasing something. I think that makes a lot of sense in the long term. With the authority being here forever, as far as we know, it makes sense. I would like, I guess, to not only look at this option, but, and I think it came up here a few years ago, I mentioned it to Pat earlier, is that what is the feasibility of taking our facility into DeSoto County and putting the offices out there? Is it even feasible? What would that cost roughly be? What are the downsides, the cons, the pros and the cons to doing something like that? I'd like to see that before we pull the trigger on buying something. But the time frame might not be compatible, and lots of other factors that would have to be weighed into the decision. But I'd be really curious, because I can remember back when we were doing the changes out of the plant, in our board discussions, I believe, or workshops, we were kind of kicking that around a little bit, thinking that might be, a good idea.
We could certainly explore the idea and see if there's room on the site, from the site master plan, to add an administrative office.
Is it feasible, and how long would it take?
Okay, Commissioner Trace.
My question on these things is always, where's the money going to come from? If we did purchase, I would want to see that study by October. I have no problem negotiating, asking a price, trying to do a deal. I would say, though, as far as building something down on the where the water facility is, we have to actually ask the staff, where do they do most of their work? Operating and maintaining is at the plant, but the staff has to do a lot with Swift Mud, people in town, the commissions, and to be honest, that might be the best place for the staff to work. So I'd say that's more almost of a staff where they most efficiently sited, although we do own property down there. So I think we have to look at time efficiency plus, owning the land. But I kind of agree. If we can own it, it's always better. But where the money comes from, who's going to pay for it, has to be in those questions also.
Okay, and I'll just add a couple of things. First of all, I think it's always owning rather than leasing is preferable. Commissioner Dougherty makes a great point. The authority is going to be here forever. I would, for me, if we pass this motion, we need to begin the negotiations with some of the best arm wrestlers that we have. Also, make the tenant understand that we're not in a rush to have them out of there. Part of the attraction is their rent payment. I think you said $64,000 a year.
Yeah, 63,509, yeah.
God bless you. And I think that's important. And also a consideration, which every private sector business has to take into account, and we should also, is what Commissioner Trace said, where do the employees based there do most of their work? But just as importantly, where are the employees that are based there? Where do they live? I don't want to be losing valuable employees because we made this move. So, again, we need a bold commissioner to move forward with a, and so far you've all been very bold, especially Commissioner Dougherty. And Commissioner Trace, the last time, you were the most bold of the group. Let's take what is in the form of a motion, sort of, and add a few things to it, and let's get a motion on the floor here.
I'll go. I move that we move on negotiating a price, looking at this, and also have a feasibility study come back on where is the most efficient spot for our office. Because if we purchase this, we'll be there a while. So let's make sure that is where we want to be.
Well put. We have a motion by Commissioner Trace. Do we have a second?
And I'll second that. And again, I assume in that analysis that will come back in October, it'd give us ideas of financing, obviously, how we would do this deal. And again, when we talk about really the two options in my mind are Lakewood Ranch and the plant. I wouldn't think that we need to go look at any other options, but I am curious to see exactly what you're saying, Mr. Chairman, where the employees live, work, and see if it did make sense to be down there at the plant site. But I think that's been looked at before, but I'm not sure, and appreciate resurrecting that and putting that to bed once and for all. Thank you.
Great. Well, great discussion. We've got a motion on the floor. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Chair votes aye. That's 4-0 on that motion. And I really am very pleased with the way we operate and the staff operates. Just a very logical, incremental path taking this authority into the future. So far, it's been just fine. At this point, we're almost done, but does anybody need a break? Do we take a 10-minute break? What is everybody's pleasure?
That'd be great.
Yeah. Let's take a 10-minute break.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, folks, we're back on the air, and we'll get started again. We're on board discussion agenda, and Pat, you're going to take us through 1A and 1B, sir?
Yes, sir. Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I'm here as the historian of the authority, so I get the pleasure of being extremely dull and our business model as to how we got to where we're at. The purpose of this presentation is to give you the background of how we got to where we're at. It's going to spur a lot of questions. There's a lot of gaps in our business model. I think Commissioner Doherty brought up, especially the one here, how do we pay for what we call as staff common benefit projects? There's a lot of other questions because we have evolved over time. So how do we prepare for the future with our mission, the vision of the authority, and this board has recently approved within the last 2 years the strategic plan update, our goals and objectives for the future. So if we look at 1991, 25 years ago, as the Peace River facility was acquired, at that time, the business model was put into place. Basically, that was a subscription-based model where that member that benefited directly paid their share by allocation. At that time, as a 12 million gallon per day facility, a single 7-mile pipeline that fed directly to Charlotte, fed off to Northport, fed to Lake Susie, which at that time was not served by DeSoto County Utilities. DeSoto County Utilities didn't even exist at that time. It was a private utility. And certainly at that time, Sarasota was not connected in and not part of the equation. So now we forward 25 years to the current system. It's evolved greatly, extremely so. 51 million gallon per day of treatment capacity, 70 miles of pipeline. Sarasota is now a major customer to the authority, and we serve up to 500,000 people within those systems collectively. Also, what's changed in that time, and I can always toss to Mr. Manson that I've been through it all, but I think he's had a finger in every contract for expansions and pipelines. So, and any legal questions, feel free to throw it at him. But what has changed drastically, raising questions, the authority used to not have capacity. Originally, everything was allocated by subscription totally to customers. Now the authority has capacity. What do we do? How do we charge for that capacity in the future if somebody needs it? How do we expand to others outside of the authority? Part of our strategic plan was to look at how do we expand out regionally to the other municipalities that have systems. What if Venice comes in? We're right across the street from them. If they want to connect into the system, how do we connect into them? What will be the board's policy, both not so that the staff, we can have those discussions, not only the authority staff, but your own individual staffs. Is it through the authority? Is it through the county member and the cities? Certainly, originally the pipes went directly to a single customer. As we grow now, the pipeline's becoming more and more of a loop system. Pipelines are no longer a one-way street. They are can go in both directions to provide water supply between different members' customers. What I walked through today is just how we got to where we're at. It's a lot of hard background, boring information. It got us to a system that you should be very proud of. It's worked. The question is, will it work in the future? Are there gaps that need to be filled in? Should we keep the same business model? Should we move to more, some other business model? Broken this into cost allocations for the CIP projects. We've broken them down into 4 categories. New water supply, regional transmission pipelines, what we've called the common benefit projects, and that needs to be defined and maybe even terminology, but we throw it out there so that there's an understanding that there's a gap and it needs to be a discussion. And non-member partnership projects. As I said before, we had Punta Gorda come in, we're connecting into them. We had no policy how we connect to a non-member. So that was kind of work our way through it as it went. So looking at what are the water allocations and who has what? That is all laid out by the water supply contracts. The 1991 facility was broken out, that the water allocation was 90% Charlotte, about almost 10% to the city of Northport, and a smidgen to DeSoto. people a lot of times ask me why Northport's not a member, why are they a customer? The authority was established in 1982 between the four counties long before the Peace River facility came under ownership. At the time of the acquisition of the facility from General Development, Northport didn't exist either. It was General Development Utilities. So Northport, when they purchased the General Development facilities within the city, they became a customer of the authority, grandfathered in as a prior General Development customer. The Peace River option, you can see, brought Sarasota to the table and being a participating customer, and that spurred the pipeline that interconnected up to Carlton from the Peace River facility. The Regional Expansion Program provided the allocations, bringing Sarasota almost up to an equal customer of Charlotte County. And then we had the rebuild allocations that were split in the 1991 rebuild, which was put into contract about 2014. Bottom line, you can see the Master Water Supply Contract Amendment B, Exhibit B of the amendment, provides the total water allocation to each customer. So that is all done contractually. The cost allocations for those water allocations are also contained within the Master Water Supply Contract. That's embedded in Exhibit F. You can see the proportionate percentages. For the most part, that followed the water allocation. However, for the Regional Expansion Program, because of a new reservoir that was a benefit to existing customers, there was a tweaking of the percentages, but those are all laid out on the cost within the contract. Also, the 91 rebuild, the cost allocations were laid out specifically to Sarasota and Northport because they were the two entities that gained water allocation. So let's just break it down to dollars. Who has invested what dollars into what components and overall? So you can see from the 91 facility, those customers that participated paid into that purchase price. Now, Charlotte County, that's been adjusted a little bit when you look at the contract, because at the time, Charlotte County retained excess capacity in the facility. It was a 12 million gallon a day facility, but certain components were sized bigger, such as the land. We haven't had to purchase new land to expand the facility because it was purchased in the 91. There was a cost associated with that, and so those costs were reimbursed to Charlotte County under the Peace River option and the Regional Expansion Program from other customers. So this shakes out to be exactly what everybody paid in the end price. So you can see Charlotte County over the years has paid a little over $51 million into the capital cost. DeSoto County, a little under $4 million. Sarasota County, almost $90 million. Northport, a little over $14 million. For a total investment by the authority, and this is the authority cost. This does not include grant funds. This is strictly how much each member has paid into support of approximately $164 million total for the water supplies that we have existing today. Where we go in the future, as I said before, it's like a subscription cost that everybody that came in for an allocation specific to the project paid a price. Obviously, in 1991, the price was a lot cheaper than the construction cost in 2009 with the Regional Expansion Program. So there was increasing costs with increasing capital cost. This is straight out of the Master Water Supply Contract. And basically it says, whereas looking at the rate setting for the future, there's a whereas clause which moves toward a common rate for water supply into the future. All debt service costs for new authority water supply sources and other costs associated therein, such as reserves, coverage, expansion of existing water supply, or fixed water purchase costs associated with the new water supply, shall be combined with the REP debt service cost for the common debt service cost and the water rate. I'm sure if I asked everybody in this room, what's that mean and how you do it, you'll get as many different answers as people you ask. So that is going to be one of our your challenges. What does that mean? How is it implemented? Or is there a different methodology that should be done to accomplish it? But that is an existing contract. So if we go to do an expansion, how will we work out the debt cost? And then I think that if you recall back in the budget process, in the base rate, the differential between customers was all debt service. Everything else within the base rate was common rated by allocation. So this is one of the elephants in the room here. What does it mean? How do we proceed with it? So that'll be a board discussion coming up, but it lays the groundwork so you know how much everybody's invested, the water allocation they have, and what's in the contract for the future. So if there's any questions or discussions, basically what I'm doing today is trying to lay the base work so you can have a lot of discussion in the future. But so then we'll move into the regional transmission systems. There's a number of those. Every pipeline was done by contracts, either master water supply contract or interlocal agreement between the authority and whatever customer that was serving. As I said before, a lot of the pipelines in the past, well, all of them in the past, have been accomplished as if they were a one-way street. That they're a benefit to a specific customer. And so allocations were contractually provided to those customers. Those hydraulic allocations also translated to dollars that are paid, either prepaid or bonded, but indebtedness to through the authority. And as I go through this, realize the authority owns the infrastructure. We own it, operate it. The customers have contractual allocations. I always liked it when a former Sarasota administrator used to always say that the authority owns the pipe, the customer owns the hole. So that's one way of looking at it. But you can see the multiple pipelines, the interlocal agreements, the master water supply contract where it's addressed, and this is the authority investment. And there again, the authority investment is the dollars paid by the customers. Doesn't include the grant fundings. We'll get to that in a few minutes. You'll see one of the changes to the formula was back in with the new pipelines, where you can see where the authority, for the first time back in 2005, started retaining capacity within the pipelines. Prior to that, with the original pipelines that were came with the 1991 acquisition and some of the other pipelines involved with the Peace River option, were 100% allocated out to the customer. So what happened in 2005, that's when SwiftMud started writing within the funding agreements. Anything they funded would have, the hydraulic capacity would go to the authority. The board has never addressed, what do we do with that capacity? If a customer wants to come in the past, we always built new pipelines because we were going to new delivery points. There comes a time now that, what if there's capacity available within a pipeline? Somebody needs the delivery point within an existing pipeline. What is the policy? What will be the business model? What will be the charges to provide some of that authority capacity to a new customer? So that's going to be one of the hallmark questions that this board will have to discuss. And it's not just authority capacity. What if, say, a pipeline that Sarasota has, the 42-inch pipeline going from the Peace River facility up to Carlton. Sarasota has 100% capacity allocation of that by contract. If Venice or somebody else wants to tap into that, what would be the charges, and who would benefit from those charges to recoup that capacity? So those are all the multiple questions that need to be discussed and resolved as we move forward and become a larger and larger loop and interconnected system as a region. So translating all that to the dollars, you can see who's invested within the infrastructure system itself. And you'll see for the first time there that the authority has invested a little over $1 million of our own dollars into it. So that was kind of the common benefit system before we even got to it. But the 20-inch pipeline that goes down US 17 through the master water supply contract was common rated by all customers that participated, with the authority holding capacity within it. When the pipeline to Northport was built, the phase 2 42-inch, it ended before connection to Charlotte County, so the authority built that on to have a little further connection to Charlotte County. But bottom line, there's been over $60 million investment by the customers in the existing pipelines. So looking at how that works overall is a more clear picture from a graphic. You can see the water supply system of $164 million. Who has invested the capital dollars into the system? And it does truly operate as a system now. We talk about the 91 acquisition, we talk about the Peace River option, we talk about the regional expansion program. They don't operate individually. They operate as a 51 million gallon per day facility in total. Looking at the pipeline investment, you can see Sarasota is heavily invested into it, but then they paid for the 20-mile pipeline that went from the Peace River facility up to the Carlton facility. As you saw from Kevin's presentations today, continuing on up towards the Manatee County line. So that provides a snapshot of who's invested what dollars. And now you add into the SWIFT mud, state money, and we also had some federal money in the past as to how that's helped to benefit to you, the customers. At the water supply side, the Water Management District has contributed about 1/3 of the overall water supply side. More impressively, the pipeline system, the loop system, which is in their strategic plan too for the southern region to keep moving on, it's almost 50% of the pipeline. So that provides a snapshot of who's invested, how they got invested. The question's going to be, how do we move forward into the future? We have non-members that we may connect in. We have authority capacity that we can sell without building new pipelines. We have member capacity that if they have availability to other customers, they can make available. So those are some of the key questions to look at on those. And then moving into the third category, the common benefit projects. We have no contract that addresses that. As Commissioner Doherty expressed today, we need policies on that. What are they? How do we define them? How are they paid for? Are we an overall system? How are we going to do that? So previously, a lot of the small projects were incorporated into the larger expansion programs. When we did the Peace River option or the regional expansion program, we did a lot of cleanup work with some of the deficiencies at the facility, incorporated them into the larger projects. At other times, some of the projects were funded through board approval to transfer from R&R or transfer from the operating fund, such as what you did today. We do need a policy for sustained funding source. So that's our key question. How do we identify these projects? How do we provide for a sustained funding source? If you look at the base rate, if you look at the two components of our water rate, the base rate based on allocation of a percent of allocation. If you were to put a specific amount on there, that's how it would break down. It would be broken down by those percentages. If you wanted to tack an assessment onto the 74 cents water use rate, that is an equal charge to every end user. So that would be the actual metered use, so be it if you were in DeSoto, Charlotte, Sarasota, there would be an additional increase in that 74 cents to fund common rate projects. There may be other sources too, so that's where some of the brainstorming needs to come from. Those are the two identified sources through the water rate. Are there other ways of doing things? And I will say that, yes, we look for outside funding too. The raw water ASR, the state has appropriated $1 million to that project, so there are potential funding sources outside of the authority to add to that. And then we get to the fourth category of non-member partnership projects. There again, it's not acknowledged in any contract. This board revised our vision statement a year ago to not only create and maintain, but create, maintain, and expand the authority. So how do we expand? Does that mean reaching out to non-members, and how do we create a truly regional system? We have no policy for that. So like I said, Venice is across the street from one of our major pipelines. What discussions can staff have? Who would pay? Would it be between the authority and Venice? Would it be between Sarasota County, our member in Venice? So those are all the questions that need to be discussed and find resolutions so that everybody knows what the policy is and how to proceed. And is it, if we were to interconnect with non-members, be it Venice, City of Sarasota, Bradenton, anybody, is it an emergency interconnect? That may have a total different slant than if it were a water supply interconnect for the long term. And who would be the participants? Would it be the authority, the city, the member county, all the above? But this is to lay out the work for you. I know it's a lot of heavy data for you, but some of the there's going to be a lot of hard discussions on this, and it needs to be. And certainly, I hate to break the news to you, but I think it takes longer than our typical allotment of board meetings. That's right. If the board wants to discuss having longer workshops, I think that needs to happen sooner than later. We can start earlier at 9 o'clock versus 9:30. We can work through the lunch hour, whatever the board pleasure. But what I intended today was to lay out, here's how everybody's invested. This is our business model today. Here are some of the gaps, and I'll guarantee you there's more gaps. Now, how do we start the discussion to remedy all that for the future? Mr. Chairman?
Well, thank you, Pat. You've given us a lot to talk about. I want to hear from my fellow commissioners, but I, for one, would love to see an expanded workshop setting. Absolutely. In a more comfortable setting than us sitting at the dais, and obviously open to the public and the media. But let's start with you, Commissioner Trace.
I personally say we ought to have maybe just a workshop on this, not on a board, but a workshop where we can sit down and discuss it. And I don't think we're necessarily reinventing the wheel. I think we should go out, and there's a lot of people doing a lot of different things. We should be able to come up with a business model. But I agree it should be worked out in a workshop.
Okay. Mr. DeLeon?
I have a question. When you have to relocate a pipeline, for example, DeSoto County has very, very limited footage, okay? Major highway, you have to relocate 42-inch line. How is that normally funded?
We're just starting to run into that situation, and that's the exact question that needs to be answered, because potentially Kings Highway could be widened over the next few years. Right now, we only have the interlocal agreement that says you build it and you pay for this to be built. Everything's silent on how to relocate.
Yeah, I think that needs to be addressed, you know. Different memberships have different pipeline lengths, and it could be a substantial cost, and if you're paying for that out of the user fees paid for water consumption, it's just, I could see some inequities built into that system. Some thoughts that come to mind immediately, I'll just be very briefly. If Sarasota has 100% of the allocated capacity on a 42-inch main, and Menace wanted to connect, or any other municipality, maybe they should be allowed to sub-meter that and you know, they're still gonna pay the authority, the rate for pumping through the 42-inch, but they should be able to invoice that potential end user. That, it's just a thought.
And those are all options that need to be explored.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate you coming right out and saying we need more workshops. I mean, when you hear the presentation, and Pat, good job framing the major elements, the 4 major categories of things where, you know, supply, transmission, the common projects, and of course, potential for other customers. And we sort of hit on some of that at the very first workshop at Lakewood Ranch when we talked about let's inventory everything that's out there in the region. Not just our own stuff and our, you know, as far as members and customers, but folks that, you know, undoubtedly in the future that are not customers right now will be facing expansion issues. Are they going to expand their supplies and their facilities on their nickel, or, you know, and just keep going? The city of Punta Gorda as an example, they decided to go that route, but that they are interconnected with us now. And that might be an option for these municipalities down the road, as opposed to expanding their facilities in a municipality, buying water from the authority. So I think, again, you've identified the 4 main categories. We obviously need to spend a lot more time on this. I would say as a process, though, to try to tackle all this, what I would recommend is you put together a list of all, very bulleted list of the policies you need. You don't have policy on this, you don't have policy on that. You've sort of done some of that here today, but really get a good checklist, and we can add to that and adjust it as time goes on. And then what I would suggest, Mr. Chairman, is that the authority staff meet with our staffs, our administration, managers, directors, and work some of the details out on these policies first before we can sit down and sort of give you a green, yeah, we want a policy on this, we want a policy on that. But I think it'd be wiser for us to get our staff people involved with this early on before we sit down and get too deep into some of those issues.
Yeah.
But I think from a processing standpoint, and that's going to take more coordination and time too, Pat, try to coordinate all those people, and you probably need to try to have them all in the same room, and that's going to be a challenge. But I think that will be the most efficient way for us, Mr. Chairman, to actually ultimately set policies.
Well, a couple of things. First of all, I know, Pat, you do meet with our staffs individually, and you get them all in a room from time to time. I'm always sensitive to getting, as you point out, I don't want to get ahead of my board. I'm here at their pleasure, and I don't want to get it too far out afield without talking to staff. So the OCD accountant in me likes the bullet-pointed lists and the laying out a number of workshops, and perhaps before every workshop, you have some meetings with staff. That makes perfect sense to me. The interesting thing is, I think we've solved a very big part of this because we have ample supplies. We keep talking about. That's the hard part that people need to recognize. Doing this part, not that it's simplistic, but is less easy than coming up with all this water. It's easier than coming up with all this water supply. But we need to do it, especially with the backdrop of here in Southwest Florida. We have a rapidly expanding population base, and no matter anyone's desires that they don't come, and we've had enough of them, they're going to come, and this is just proper planning for our future. With that, anybody want to elaborate on, well, and let's talk about this if you all would. Right now we meet every other month. There's a seemingly larger gap because staff had to work around all the commission breaks. But how often are we willing to meet, and what kind of timelines? What length of time? I mean, for me, if we're going to do a workshop, do it in a setting that's more comfortable than this. I'm not opposed to a 3 or 4 hour workshop. We'll take a break in the middle of it, maybe lunch is the break in the middle of it. But I'd like to hear from you all how frequently we want to do this and still maintain our regular board schedule of every other month. So Commissioner Trace, let's start with you.
Geez, thanks. I have no problem with workshops, as long as we have a day we can all meet, which, amongst our schedule. I would say we should continue the schedule that we're on meetings and workshops as needed, and when we need a workshop, we get there in the morning and work through lunch and get 5, 6 good hours.
Perfect.
Of course, my staff will tell you that I like to start at 6 or 7 in the morning, which doesn't work for most people, so, my idea of a full day is different than a lot of folks. But, yeah, I mean, you work on what you have, you say the problems, you work them out, and you solve them, or you go back and come back. I don't know that we need workshops necessarily every other month, so, but when we have problems, let's sit down and discuss it.
Commissioner Trace, I was with you 100% of that ride except the 5 a.m. part, but other than that, I'm with you.
Well, the Lakewood Ranch isn't that far from my county, so I'm good to go.
Mr. DeLeon, this is your chance to throw Commissioner Langford under the bus completely. What would you like to see him do?
I think he can work any schedule. He's good.
Okay. Commissioner Dougherty?
Yeah, I think we really have to increase the frequency of our meetings, and I'll let Pat work with all of our staffs. I'm available just about all the time, except when I'm heading to North Carolina for a couple of weeks. But other than that, I think we need to spend the time on it. I think that a challenge will be on the beginning of this process, getting that list together. And then maybe we need a meeting before October or something depending how long it's going to take to get your list together, Pat, of the policies that you need, so that you can start meeting with the staff people as soon as possible. I don't know, but I think that's the first critical step, Mr. Chairman, is try to see exactly what his needs are from us, and making sure we, maybe before October, give you the green light on a list. I'm okay with that.
Well, I am too. And Pat, again, because of trying to set this meeting up with all our breaks, there's 2 months and a week between today and the October 3rd meeting, our next meeting. So maybe that is a good path for you to hopefully get started on. And I'm always going to be available except when I'm in Tennessee or North Carolina, or when my wife says I can't be. So otherwise, we need to do the frequent meetings, and if we're going to do a workshop, and our staffs have been prepped, and they have in turn talked with us, I think a big block of time is going to be needed. Let's not go through all this and then meet for 2 or 3 hours. Let's do a block of time. Okay, any other problems you'd like us to solve today, Mr. Lehman?
No, so just make sure we're all clear. I think it's very reasonable for us to come back at our October board meeting with a bullet list of policy gaps, what we might need, because we'll be meeting with your staffs. We already have a meeting scheduled with them prior to that meeting. I always find August a hard month for anybody because everybody, so many people out of town. But if we were to come back in October with that list, so you can review that at the board meeting and certainly have discussions with your staffs, with me and anybody else, as to comments you may have on that bullet list, and then we can certainly initiate the hard grinding work. How do we solve those, and how do we prioritize those? And in the meantime, we can check schedules and see where the 4 of you maybe magically line up on certain days. So
Mr. Chair.
That sounds like the way to go.
I think that sounds like a great plan for us, very organized.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir.
I happen to sit on the technical advisory board with Pat's staff, and one item just that immediately comes to mind, and I don't know if there's any interest to provide some direction on this. As the water supply and the treatment technologies get more expensive, because we see that surface water coming off the river recently inexpensive to treat, but you start getting to reverse osmosis, the ASR. And all those technologies are being developed in part to possibly support new additions and new customers. Should there be a tiered system for legacy customers versus those new customers that are requiring us to explore different treatment alternatives. It is just a thought that I ponder upon. We're engaging in all these exploratory activities, trying to grow the authority, ensure that we have adequate water supply, but, you know, at what cost and to what end and who pays? That is really, at least from my perspective, a big concern. The water coming off the river versus the ASR versus reverse osmosis. It's just a big difference in cost.
Well, that is well put, and I'm sure Pat's adding it to his list. And forever after, it will be referred to as the Julian de Leon tiered system, okay? That's the benefit you get for bringing it up. With that, Pat, anything else before we move to Mr. Manson's report?
No.
Okay. Doug?
Got the general counsel's report. First, just want to do a brief litigation update. Obviously, we know that we have 7 petitions filed against our latest water use permit, our 50-year water use permit. The update is simply that a hearing has been set for 3 weeks, starting January 28th and going through February 15th of 2019. So, better. So the hearing has been set from January 28th of 2019 to February 15th of 2019. So it's set for 3 weeks. Motions to dismiss were filed last week on all 7 of the petitions by both the Water Management District and by the authority. You know, obviously I wouldn't file them if I didn't think we had good cause. Now, again, I add, they have to show they're going to be substantially impacted, and it has to be an impact of such immediate issue that it gives them standing. And, their petitions are built on assumptions and also the idea of speculation. It's threefold. One, that they'll someday have an actual withdrawal on Peace River because they don't. 2, and they can't because the upper Peace River right now is in recovery, which means it's below the minimum flowing level. No one will get a water use permit out of it. So at some point in the future, they'll actually build a project. Then at some point in the future, somehow they'd be prohibited from doing that because of our withdrawals, and our withdrawals physically cannot impact them. So it's got to be some kind of regulatory withdrawal impact. And so they're speculating as to what regulations will be in the year 2044. So I think that it's speculative enough. I'm hoping that the administrative law judge will agree with us. Motions to dismiss have a high standard. Every fact that's alleged in the petition is assumed to be true. So we've got to get over that hurdle, and I'm hoping we do, and we'll hopefully get an answer. They get an extension of time to file those responses, so the judge will probably have some time also to review those since it's a dispositive motion. But we hope within the next 30 to 40 days we'll have a response on them. The other thing is, I did get approached by counsel for Lakeland that there is an idea that they would like to hold a mediation, which is basically just a settlement negotiation with a mediator there at some point to discuss this, and that all the parties are interested in doing this, meaning everyone other than the district and the authority. I've always taken the position that if there's a chance to resolve a case without having to litigate it, I think that benefits our clients. So I'm open to it. I want to get what you feel, though. I want just a consensus. I don't need a motion. Obviously, when this were to go forward, just with the schedules of 7 different entities, and I think we have, I want to say 5 different law firms or attorneys involved, probably be someplace in September, probably mid to late September before we could schedule anything. Mediations are always non-binding, and the idea would be that litigation staff would go, and also obviously staff of the authority would go, hear it out. I've received no settlement offers of any kind. No one has proposed any solution or made an offer to us since the litigation has begun. So, and the only thing I'd like to say is because of the fact that there are some settlement negotiations potentially occurring out there, I'd like to request a closed door session to discuss settlement negotiations and or legal strategies related to the litigation at our next meeting. So if you agree with that, then we'll set that up and we'll have it noticed so that we can take that time if necessary to discuss those issues in a closed door session.
Absolutely. Any thoughts from any of the commissioners?
Well,
Commissioner Dougherty?
I was just going to say, a mediation, I guess, would be something, it would put us in a good place, I think, with the administrative hearing judge, too, if we did participate, I believe.
Right.
And so I think it's a wise step. It's non-binding, so it makes sense. And I appreciate you requesting the the executive sessions, until we get this thing resolved, I think we should have that on our agendas.
And I'll
every
probably
time.
be doing that, just so you know, at every meeting from now on, so that if we have something occur between that 2-month section, I can have it noticed and we can have that session without having, you know, the rush of trying to notice it right before because something happened.
Sounds good to me, sir.
That's fine. And Mr. Manson, is there anything else you need from all of us? You know where we stand.
Not at this time. Thank you, sir.
Okay. Executive Director's Report.
Yeah, just wanted to mention that the annual water forum is scheduled in Orlando, October 4th and 5th. I'll be sending the information out to all of you. If any of you want to attend or have the authority take care of the registration and accommodations, just let me know, but I'll be sending it out to you.
Okay. With that, or anything on the routine status reports? Pat? Okay. We have no, we have board member comments, but I also, again, have no public cards. So any further comments from any of the board? Commissioner Dougherty?
I was just going to request, I guess, I would assume Mr. Manson, Mr. Lehman are probably going to do this anyways, but as we're aware, I believe all aware, that Commissioner Langford's not here because of a land use hearing in DeSoto County on the Mosaic permitting process, I guess a rezoning request. As that project moves through the process, assuming they get, you know, a rezone, and they move into other regional, state, and federal permitting, if we could keep our eyes open, watch what's going on, make sure we've got, during those process activities, there's places that we can comment if necessary, and just want to make sure we're on top of it. That's all.
We are, as part of the report that we give on the watershed, we look at all the water use permits and permits that will affect the Peace River, including environmental resource permits and phosphate permits, trying to look for anything that would cause a diminution in flow or water quality impact. And so we are kind of watching those proceedings and listening in on what's happening. And we've also had discussions with Mosaic as far as, you know, the Horse Creek monitoring plan and some other issues, just to make sure that we have a continuation of that. And obviously maybe some augmentation, looking and see what they're doing on the new permits.
During our board meeting yesterday, we also suggested that I think Commissioner DeSeo, our vice chairman, was going to contact Jennifer Hecker with the National Estuary Program down in Charlotte Harbor. Just not only is the river a concern of ours, it's of course Charlotte Harbor itself. So just want to make sure we're on top of it. Thank you very much.
Okay, with that, our next meeting is October 3rd. It's in DeSoto County. And just a question for staff, will we have the video capabilities up and running by then? Yes, perfect. All right, with that, if there's no other business, we are adjourned.